Great. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to our Q&A session with Kate Drummond. I'm so excited about this topic that we're going to have tonight because I've had lots of people ever since this effort is launched, and even before this, who've asked questions and been curious about the connection and the overlap between ADHD, autism spectrum, learning differences, and intuition, how how they're connected and or not connected. And there is definitely a connection. And I'm so happy to have Kate to come and be able to talk about this with our group tonight. And there's been a lot of interest in this topic. So I just want to give you a little information about Kate, and we're going to launch into a really good discussion around the whole topic. So Kate she is an occupational therapist. I'm going to give just read her little bio that we had in the group. And is that in 2007, she experienced a remembering of her intuitive psychic abilities that she was in touch with as a child, teen, and young adult. She had purposely shut her abilities down after a scary encounter with a spirit. Kate also was a sensory sensitive child. So when she had this remembering, she also had an aha moment that the sensory children that she had worked with in occupational therapy for a decade were also highly empathic and intuitive. She is training her staff of therapists at About Play to use a blended approach of intuition and energy work in combination with the more traditional OT practices. Kate also has an adult energy practice in Atlanta, the Energetic Heart, and is currently building a center to house both practices and finally create a bridge for the medical and intuitive energetic worlds. Kate is the mother of 3 teenage children with varying levels of intuitive abilities. And I'm so excited to have Kate here. And I do want to just to mention that we met through Rebecca. So people who've been in the group knows that Rebecca Fiscal-Kramer, I interviewed her back in September about her book, Let Them Move. And she works with Kate. So I'm so happy they're doing such amazing work in their practice down there in Atlanta. And I just thought this would be a wonderful time to have Kate come in and we have this conversation and people can ask questions, get questions answered, and we just have a good conversation around the whole topic. So welcome, Kate.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ellen. I really appreciate this, being able to come and talk to people about this. And thank you for having me on your platform. You're doing amazing work. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. I'm excited to share some of my story and kind of what we're doing and how we're working with kids, and also just to answer any questions that people have and hopefully really inspire others to maybe look in whatever way that they're working, whether they're a parent of a child who has neurodiversity, or they may be a teacher or a therapist, just to begin to open up a little bit to this perspective, because it will change things just by being open to it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that was the point of this whole highly intuitive kids community, is where people can come and we can start having these conversations to, like you said, openly discuss it and start normalizing some of this, because if it's not talked about, people think that there's something unique or maybe strange or weird about it, but it's not. And the more you understand it, the more we understand how to support our children, and not only our children, adults too, who may not understand or know how to work with what they're experiencing or feeling. So I'm really glad that we have this forum to do this and that you're with us today, Kate. So I'm going to just dive right in. So let's start off with your background, just so people can understand when did you notice your abilities? How did you come to them? How did you embrace them? Just kind of take us through your story.
I can remember communicating or talking with spirit as a child. I was known to have a very high imagination as a child, but also I was very connected. I remember sitting in one of the rooms in the home where I grew up and listening to records and just talking and having conversations. And I lived in an old home. It a lot of that was happening on my own, so I wasn't really talking to my parents about it or my any of that. But growing up, my mother was also connected and was experiencing connection with spirit. And I grew up in a quite religious household of Catholic in upstate New York. And all of this, I guess, the spiritual encounters that my mother was having were rooted in Catholicism. And I found that interesting. There was a period of time when I got into and this was kind of carrying on. And then later I got into probably college age, 18, 19, 20. And this is when I was just really playing around with channeling, and I didn't have a teacher. I didn't really know what I was doing. So I would just open everything up, and then things would come through that I wasn't prepared to encounter or experience. And so it really scared me. And I think people, when I would make contact with people who had crossed over, and I was getting very clear information, and I would connect them to other people. I think people thought we were making it up, like it was a party trick, like it was all because the information that I would get would be so right on. But anyhow, whatever, there was, like I said, or like Ellen mentioned, there was an unfavorable spirit that kind of came through in one of these sessions, and it sort of kind of clung on to a group of friends and myself. And it was really terrifying, to be honest with you. And I could sort of see it. I could sense it. It could move physical objects, so it was a stronger spirit. And I really just was at a point when it was distracting me from my studies. So I called my mom and just said, I don't want this anymore. How do I turn it off? And she said, you just don't give it any more of your attention and turn it off that way. And so I did. And it sure worked, to the point where although I would still have like precognitive dreams and sort of like hunches and premonitions, I totally blocked out the channeling. I totally blocked out that level of connection with spirit, like a trauma. It was blocked. It was gone. Until between the births of my twins, who are my firstborn, and my daughter, I had this massive reawakening. Suddenly I remembered everything. It all came back online, so to speak. And at this point, I had been an occupational therapist for about a decade. And I had this moment of recognition and realization that, wow, I was this sensory sensitive kid who would just get lost in the world. And I was very, very sensitive to tactile or touch input. So like if I had a wrinkle in my sock, I would flip out. Hair comb, all of it. Like I was very, very sensitive kid. And back in the 70s and the 80s, that was just, nobody knew what that was or what to do with it. So I just sort of, when I discovered OT as an adult, I was like, oh my gosh, this is what I wish I had when I was a kid. And that's what got me into being an OT. But then, so when I had this reawakening, it also led me to realize that all of these little sensory kids were like me, and that actually these children were highly empathic, sometimes to the point of distraction. So they might be in a classroom and the teachers would say, well, they just can't focus on somebody. They're always thinking about something else, or they're hyper focusing on that other little kid over there who's having these problems and melting down, because they're feeling it. They're so sensitive. They're feeling the other child's emotion. Or these kids might look like pleasers. They could look a million different ways. But I made the connection, and then I just felt so compelled to help these kids in a different way. So compelled. I was like, okay, there's got to be something more that we can do for these kids. There's got to be something more. So I was very fortunate to have met and connected with a group of professionals who were also using energetic practice in their work. And they kind of guided me. One person in particular was guiding me to take some trainings that I could use to help the kids. So that's what I did. I started doing trainings, and I started bringing what I was learning in and into my OT. And I was doing this all very quietly because, oh my gosh, I just would think there's no way that I can be public about this. It's too weird. And this is just for time reference. This is probably about 2010, 2011 when this is happening, strongly coming in around 2012. And, it was just such a powerful aha moment that I just felt so compelled to help these kids. And I began training and doing more trainings. And then when I found out that American Occupational Therapy Association accepted Reiki as a viable treatment modality, although I had no Reiki training, I had other types of energetic training. I went ahead and got training to Reiki up to the point of mastery so that I could use it and talk about it and it wouldn't be, endangering my license in any way. So that's kind of when it started to become more visible. And it was terrifying for me as an intuitive at this point. I'm well on the path of redeveloping my skills and connecting with spirit. And I just kept getting this message to get visible, and it scared the living daylights out of me. I really was afraid to do it. But I can tell you, the more I step into it, the better I feel, the more connected to myself that I feel, the more I feel more fully accessible, and I'm telling you, as soon as I started embracing it, and this is not something that I sit down and talk to all the kids about, especially early on, like very directly. Now, sometimes I do, but it's just holding that intention in the sessions, and we just see the most beautiful things open up. The kids open up in such beautiful ways.
Wow. Well, that's wonderful, Kate. And I wanted to just touch back on a couple. When you said that your abilities opened up with the birth of your child, that's something that happens because it was after I had my son. And for me, unfortunately, like 3.5 months after he was born, my mother passed, but my abilities opened up. It's like hormonal changes really bring this on too. And
Yes.
especially like women, that mother's instinct they talk about kicks in. And yeah,
Yes.
so that's a time that it really does come in. But I love that you recognized in the kids what you knew in yourself. And that's what makes you so powerful, is because you understand and you can hold that space for them in the right way because you understand what they're experiencing and what they're going through. And you shared some wonderful stories with me about some of your experiences that I think would be so helpful for the parents to hear. If you can share some of just how amazing these kids are and what they share with you and why they feel so comfortable because of how you've set the stage in your practice with, letting intuitive abilities be okay. So I wanted to have you talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, first of all, I just would like to also say that all of the information I'm presenting in this class is anecdotal. So I've not done any research, participate in any kind of research or anything like that at this point. This is anecdotal sharing of what I've experienced in my practice between myself and my team of therapists. The first big thing that I remember happening when I started to do this training, and again, at this point, I am just receiving this training, I'm bringing it in to practice. I'm just beginning to open up and hold space for these kids and tune into them in a different way with my abilities on purpose. And I will say this because this is very important to me. My connection to these children is only for their highest good, period. So I'm not interested in any kind of manipulation or anything like that at all. And I'm very, very clear with my staff about that as well. We are open up to these children to see how we can help them better, how we can support them more fully. So just having said that, it's important for me to say that. So when there's one story coming to mind, when I first began using these techniques and just sort of opening up my abilities and really letting them express themselves. And it's literally, I'm not saying anything to these kids at this time. I'm not doing anything that would flag is unusual to them. It's just the energy that I'm holding. So the kids just start saying the most amazing things to you in confidence. So this little boy, and again, if, I will never use anybody's name. This is all in confidence, right? All kind of confidential. These are just, I won't ever refer to anybody's correct name in these stories, just so you know. But this little boy who was on the autism spectrum, verbal, highly intelligent, and very connected. I think he must have been, I'm going to guess at the time, he was about 6 years old. And he's playing and he's swinging and he's moving his body. And all of a sudden he stopped and he looked me right in the eye and he said, "Miss Kate, I've got to tell you something." And I said, "Okay, what do you want to tell me?" And he said, "I'm not from here. And my mother, she's not from here either. We come from a different place, a different planet. And we've got, but my sister and my father, they're not from," and he's telling me this elaborate story. Now, having had the amount of experience as an OT at this point, over a decade, I know echolalia. I know that there's children on the autism spectrum sometimes repeat things, repeat stories verbatim. This was not that. Because it crossed my mind, is this a story? Is this a script? Is he saying something to me? But it was just not. It was very from the heart. It wasn't scripted in a language that would flag for me. And he's telling me, and it was like he just had to get it off his chest. And I just looked at him and I said, "Wow, thank you for so much for telling me that." And then that's all he needed to do. And then he just went back to playing and moving his body, So something like that, or another one that I'm remembering with a little girl whose mother was also highly intuitive. So she was one of the first parents who was really open with me and wanting me and wanting to access my tools to help her daughter. And her daughter was in a really stuck place. At this time, this child was probably 4. No diagnosis for this child, just having some sensory issues, some sensory processing differences. And this little girl, mom just said, "I'm stumped. I don't know what to do. Can you please just check in with her energetically?" And, she's saying this to me, not in front of the child, obviously. But so when we're all playing together, I just opened up and I said, "Can you show me?" And I'm asking this child almost like telepathically, not with my voice, but in my mind. I'm asking her, "Can you please show me in a way that I can understand what's wrong?" And this child was obsessed with the color blue. She was in her blue period. Everything was blue. So the colors were blue. She was drawing with blue. Everything was blue. So she's coloring or scribbling or drawing. And she looked up and she said, "Miss Kate, can you, I need the yellow." And I said, "Okay." And her mom and I just sort of looked at each other like, wow. So she grabs the yellow and she's scribbling and scribbling and scribbling and scribbling. And then she looked up at me and she said, "Miss Kate, how do you spell block?" So then we knew that there was probably a block at the yellow chakra, which is the solar plexus chakra. So that has to do with her independence. So to me, that was very clear. This is not a child who would normally choose to use a yellow or something like that. So that was like an example. Another example that I can share that's kind of interesting, and it's more of a physical thing, is we have a very large gym, a sensory gym with lots and lots of different toys, swings, climbing equipment, all of it. It's big space. And so the materials in our gym purposefully can be used in infinite number of ways, right? So part of the joy of this type of therapy that we do is allowing the children to create and play in what we would call motor planning. We're looking at how they're planning, what their ideas are when they're creating. So they'll do these very kind of interesting setups, or they'll play with materials in a way that I never would thought to have used it like that. So I get lots of ideas from just watching the kids and letting them explore. So there was like an elaborate setup where a child had set all these step stools up and then was using them in a really different way. They were frog hopping over the stools versus stepping on them. And then they were walking backwards. And now we picked up the stools at the end of the session, put them away. But what I've noticed with these little sensitive children is that they'll come into the space afterwards, like the next session or the next appointment rounds will come in. And I have children come and do the same activities and use the things in the same way as the child who was in the gym before. There's no way that they could have, known this. It's so unusual. So when I see that, that also flags to me as, oh, they're picking up on the energy of the kids that were in here before. There's some kind of imprinting that happened in the space. So it's fascinating. Those are some examples. Is that what you're
Yeah, and that's, I think it's good for people to hear that, because all you're doing is holding space, and these kids are just doing what comes naturally to them, and then you're able to observe and see. One of the questions would be, do you find that all the kids have this, that you're working with, most all of them have this heightened intuition, or is it you're just seeing it's in some children with some learning differences and not others? Or what have you noticed?
Yeah, that's such a good question. In my experience, I would say that the profile that flags to me as being the most highly intuitive and empathic is ADHD. I don't know if there's some wiring in the brain, but I will see what I refer to these kids as like weather vanes, because they're just picking up information. They're just picking up information and, presenting it or mimicking it or intuiting it from their family, intuiting it from their friends. It's very clear to me with ADHD, but also with children with autism, and then just sensory processing. I would say it's unusual for a child. And now some children obviously they're all different, right? So like some children are a little bit more sensitive than others, but I would almost say that it's the majority of the kids that come in here have some kind of an intuitive or heightened intuitive empathic ability. And it might look very different from one child to the next, but that's what intuition is for all of us, right? It can look very different from one person to the next. I don't know. My speculation is that there's something with the neurological profile that leads to access information beyond the physical body and beyond the physical world.
Right. And it's also because the brain is operating a little differently.
Yes.
You said with the children that have these diagnoses for ADD, autism spectrum, some of these other learning differences. So it's an actual brain difference.
And I also will mention this, which I know it wasn't part of the flag in the talk, but I also think that trauma profiles can lead to heightened intuition 100%.
Actually, I agree with you, Kate. I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, because, and I'll explain it a little bit. Sometimes, now this is just one explanation, and there's probably 1,000 others. And I know it's not the main focus of our talk, but I'll just say it to mention it, because a lot of the kids we do work with in here, we do a lot of trauma healing somatic techniques such as rhythmic movement training and whatnot, right? So we're releasing the trauma from the body through these rhythmical movements, and let's just also identify trauma. Trauma, we talk, Brene Brown, I believe, was the first to use the big T, little t analogy. So big T being like a very big trauma, a death, something very serious, a house on fire, really big trauma. And then little t could be like just these little sort of like feeling not paid attention to by a parent, or, maybe getting a brief separation in a busy place from a parent, let's just talk about the pandemic. Let's just talk about the pandemic, because that is a collective trauma as well. So
Mhm.
when a child, let's say a child has the trauma of being raised in a household where there's a narcissist, you learn as a young person to read the cues of the person who's had this problem or this disorder. So you get really good about reading people. It's almost like a survival skill. So you just learn to become highly intuitive and watch people's reactions and sense what they're doing, and you're just hyper in tune to it. So I just will say that as well. That's also part of the mix.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I agree with that. And I'll just do just a little side story, because I had an adult actually who had a head trauma, and she was not intuitive before, like that she knew of, but
Mhm.
she all of a sudden now is starting to have precognitive dreams and making predictions and all these things that were scaring her. So like when you're talking about trauma, that can
Yeah.
definitely trigger things, trigger intuition. So
Yeah.
I just think that all of this is fascinating. So your whole staff, you had mentioned, they're all intuitive, that you hire in to help work with these beautiful children with these these unique abilities and perception of the world. So talk a little bit about that. What made you decide to do that, and how you all support and hold the space for the kids?
It's kind of like it's funny because I never, I'm not a CEO type person. I don't have that personality. I'm a helper, I'm a therapist, and everything that has occurred in my practice and the growth that it's had has all been just so very organic. So I made a move to be closer to my children because I wasn't seeing enough of them. So I moved into a big facility right near my house. And it was scary for me because I knew that moving into this larger facility, and this is in 2014, that I was going to be able to stay here, I was going to need to hire people. And at that point, I was not willing. I was well in the intuitive work, in my own personal evolution and training. And I was unwilling to go back in the closet, so to speak, about my intuition. I was not willing to do that again. I'd worked around people. I wasn't going to hide from people. I wasn't going to hire people that were not aligned with this. And I just was almost like frozen in fear for a little while about it. And, I just asked Spirit. I just asked Spirit to send me the people that would be supportive of this. And I asked for a very clear and direct knowing when I would meet with these people. And that's just how it's been. I found my first therapist, and who was sent to me through a friend, a parent whose parent, needed to. And then I went and met with her at lunch, and she didn't know it was like a soft interview, but she's so lovely. And as soon as I saw her, I just knew. I'm like, yes, I get a very strong impression about a person. So yeah. So, and she, a lot of the people that come in, I wouldn't say, they're coming in with a ton of intuitive skills, but they're coming in sensitive and intuitive a little bit and awareness of it, but they kind of doubt themselves, right? Like a lot of us in the beginning, like, oh, that's not real, because we've been conditioned, we've been trained out of it to question ourselves, to not trust ourselves, to not believe in ourselves, So, my work with them and my intention with them is to really, let's see where we can take this. Like, let's encourage each other. Let's see, and I coach them and I work with them and we collaborate. So like, for example, in our staff meetings, our weekly staff meetings, we talk, of course, a lot of shop, but then we always save a point where we can, okay, who has a family that they're really stuck with, who's working with a child that they're just, they're needing some guidance with. And then we all tune in, we all meditate, and it's again for the purpose of helping this child or this family and we all just go into a brief meditation, and then we all share what we got, whether it's claircognizance, if we're knowing, whether it's clairvoyance, that we're able to see things or hear things, or however we receive information. And what I found that as the director but also as a collaborator with my team, that little practice of that little exercise of giving ourselves permission and just trust. And it doesn't matter, like my whole thing with my team is that I encourage them by saying, just share even if you just got an impression of a color or a feeling, you can just share it. We don't expect you to be coming in with these strong visions if you're newer to this. So I'm coaching them too. And it doesn't matter if our things sync up, but it's fun when they do. I mean, they often will be a common thread of a theme that we'll get. And then what we do with that information that we get is we decide, or we kind of talk about how we could then take that information and apply it throughout our framework and our lens.
Well, let me ask Kate, and I think that's beautiful how the staff is working together and having that intuitive ability, like I said, and that holds the space for the kids to be open and actually be their authentic selves and be able to say these things. How did the parents, do they know, and are they supportive of what you're doing as far as pulling in the intuitive side of things, intuitive aspect?
No, it's a very mixed bag. So some of the parents are like, and I will say, like, some of the parents are very on board, and they are, they love it. It's kind of like when you're reading something. So they'll read about it on the website, and there's some wording in the website that's there. And then I sent letters out to the community and let them know, like private, within our community, and share with them that way as well. But it's like some people, when they're reading through it, it's like they don't pick up on that stuff. So they don't, if they're not open to it. But the people that are open to it and see it, they're like, oh my gosh, we're coming to you. We really want you to use these gifts. So I will say that the families where it's a conversation within the family, where we can talk very openly, where there's kind of full access to all of the abilities, those kids, it's like they got some jet fuel, it's really cool to see. Now there's other families where it's a hard no, where they'll say, we know you do this, we love you as a therapist, but it's not for us. So those families, the energetic support is in our office, and it's never forced. Like, it's just here, and it's set up in a way that the child's higher self can take it if they want. We don't do things forcibly. Like if I were to say to a child, would you like me to share some energy with you? I can share it through my hands. What color would you like it to be today? Or where do you want it? Where do you think your body needs it? So they'll, kind of tune in and show us where they need it when we're doing some of our other kind of techniques.
Great. Wow. Well, I think this is really good. I wanted to, talk through some of that so other people, some of the other practitioners can hear how you're doing things and can, maybe take some nuggets or tips on what they might be able to do to incorporate in theirs. I love how you're bridging, like you said, you're bridging the gap between medical and intuitive, because that's when you have highly intuitive children, most people, you go to your doctor, or they're going to school. You really need to have, when you have a highly intuitive child, you need to have an intuitive person like your practice, and others, even if you had an intuitive doctor, someone that can tap into that aspect of the child, because you're always only having a part of them that's being dealt with and not the whole piece of them. And then when they are highly intuitive, because high intuition can mimic other things too, like ADHD and sensory processing disorder, and these other things, high sensitivity, kids that don't necessarily have the brainstem issue can be diagnosed with those diagnoses, because people don't understand that they're highly intuitive and what that means and how it all comes together. So you need to have somebody like you and that can help provide that support to families as well. So I think that that's very important. So I want to open because this is such a big topic and there's so much in so many different directions that we can go in. I want to just take a couple minutes before I open the floor because I want the parents to have time to ask questions.
Yeah.
With what you're seeing, what are some of the what are some of the tips or techniques you could share with the parents and the others, caregivers and educators and other mental health professionals, service professionals here, that you found helpful in working with these kids? What are some of the key techniques that you found to help integrate in this with them?
So that's a great question. And there's, obviously that's individualized to a degree, right? But in general, I will say movement is an amazing catalyst. So for holding space, first of all, holding the space for the kids to just be curious, to not discount. I know that I'm probably preaching to the choir here in this situation, but that's just holding the space and acknowledging, validating feelings, all of that. Because it can be, and then empowerment. So like empowerment through movement, empowerment through play, like we'll just do little nuggets with the kids because sometimes that's all they can take is a little nugget, whether if it's a therapeutic intervention or a concept we're introducing or a tool that we're giving them. And then we say, go move, go play. What do you want to do? What does your body need? We're always redirecting it back to you. And what I like to do with children is to not say, what do you need? Because that's overwhelming. Like we like to say, what does your body need to do? Does your body need to move? Does your body need to be squashed in some pillows to get some pressure to feel good? Do you need to climb? Do you need to jump? Does your body need that? Like what would feel good to your body? Because that I'm going to pull back on this beautiful book that my colleague Becca Pascal wrote, Let Them Move. And I know she's been here on Ellen's thing, but it really, movement is so great for kind of integration. It calms the nervous system down, certain types, especially what we call heavy work. So anything that engages the muscles and the joints of the body, it's the proprioceptive system that we want to light up because that can really ground a child in a good way. It can also raise their arousal if they're tired. So it's got this wonderful equalizing quality. That system, that proprioceptive or that heavy work system, is the one system that cannot, in our nervous system, that cannot be overstimulated. We can get overstimulated visually, we can get overstimulated tactily or by touch, we can get overstimulated by smell, by noise, every other sense. Even by losing our balance, we can jerk and have a response, but not with the proprioceptive system. So I would do things that engage the muscles: climbing, jumping, pushing, pulling, riding bikes, running, trampoline, martial arts, yoga, dance. All those wonderful things are just so good. So that's a really great integration. Am I covering it, Ellen?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Because that just helps them process that energy, like you said, and bring them back to center. But we did, for those, and I know we have a lot of new folks have even come into the group, but Rebecca was here back in September and there's a video with her interview, and that's a good book. It's listed on our website. But that's an excellent book, and it talks about the need for children to have movement, more movement, just for the reasons that you said, Kate. So I know we have about 15 minutes left, and I could continue to sit and talk. I'm going to go out right now. I want to see if anybody has questions, because I want to make sure that we get some of the parents' questions answered. You can just raise your hand if you have one for Kate. Just anything dealing with the overlap between, ADHD, autism spectrum learning differences. Emily?
Sorry, I was trying to figure out how to do the little hand raise thing on Zoom. I always love hearing from Kate, and I just feel like every time I come away from hearing Kate talk, I always just come away with just feeling so much better about everything. Thank you, Kate.
Oh. Thank you so
Love your
much.
words.
Thank you.
Kate knows my ADHD daughter, who is just this highly intuitive spirit who really feels like I can just see her feed off the emotions of others when she's in, I mean, one-on-one or in a group setting. And so now that she's a teenager, it's getting real and it's
Yeah.
getting interesting. And so my question is, when we have these super sensitive kids who, no matter how good of an actor I am, no matter how much of a smiley face I put on, she can always tell if I've got something going on the inside. Like she just reads people. So as a teenage girl, we are dealing with sometimes, some friend battles, and like, they'll feed off each other. And um, actually, the kids that she gets along with best are other ADHD kids, and other like one of her best friends has autism, and they get along great. Um, how can I help her not like escalate any girl drama when
Mm.
just the emotions and the feelings, it just gets so big so quickly, and part of that is 13.
Right. And are you talking about like helping her in those moments directly, or like perhaps when she's at home thinking about it? Is there,
I think I can't really do much in the moment, and I don't want to be that hover parent too.
right,
And I
right.
want to allow her to try to figure it out herself. But how can I support her afterward or later? Maybe have like a little conversation, or like
Yeah.
plant an idea.
Yeah, I think it's really good to start opening up a conversation that, wow, she is got a superpower of being so able to read people's emotions so easily. And I mean, I would just talk about it in a very positive light. And then to validate the feelings of, wow, I noticed that, it's so intense with this one person, or when you get together. What do you think, and even like, what would feel supportive to you when you come off of that? Do you think like a shower would help, taking a bath? And like literally when you have a bath or shower, just imagine washing anything that got stuck to you from that person's, what they said or their feelings. You could take a shower, or she might just need some alone time with music on headphones to reorganize her nervous system. But also like learning to be like, wow, how, like noticing how she feels when she's around these people. And is she feeling very, does she come away feeling really good or not so good? And just look at the patterns with that. Because every now and again, we're all going to get in a tiff with somebody who we care about, right? But if it's a consistent pattern, just drawing her attention to that, it's really, good to be with people that light you up and that are fountains and not drains, so to be around the fountains, to look for the fountains, the people that may fill you up, that make you feel good. And sometimes, it's hard to break from a friendship, and maybe it'll just happen naturally, or maybe, also just empowering her to set some boundaries with a person. Like, wow, what you're saying is really a lot. And also telling her, to set a little bubble of protection around her body when she's around that person, fill it with her favorite color, call in a protector, right? And then, that's a tool that she might want to use with them. Um, and also, yeah, just empowering her to set boundaries, and you could even give her, I mean, like, so a lot of these little empaths, a lot of these little kids are so sensitive about hurting somebody else's feelings because they're so empathic that they know what that's going to feel like. They can even judge, or like they can even forecast what that's going to feel like, right? And it's so painful they didn't want to dare hurt anybody else's feelings. I mean, I was like that, right? So so you could do the practice, if that's the case, of to have her send them a heart bubble and fill it with so much love, and then just so they can feel better about themselves, so that's a very empowering act, is what I teach all of my kids, no matter what their age is. Send them a heart bubble, And you can send a heart bubble by putting your hands on your heart and just imagining this beautiful bubble going to that person. Maybe you fill it with glitter, maybe it's filled with like unicorns or their favorite comic book or their anime, like whatever they're into, right? And then you just send it to them, and you can send it to them no matter where they are in the world. That action for our very highly empathic children is a game changer.
Yeah.
That's a straight up game changer.
Wow.
Thank you. Thank you. That was just fantastic. Thank you so
Oh, good. Thank you for asking the question. So good to see you, Emily.
Yeah, good to see you.
So that's great. So that's teaching them to help to regulate, help work with their own energy and do it in a positive way. And that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I have another question, but I'm going to save that if anybody else has a question for you. Okay. Well, I wanted to ask Kate, because it seems like now there's so many more kids that are being diagnosed with like ADHD and these different things. Have you seen it change for your practice? And how do you work with the schools with this? There's a connection between the schools and OT, right?
Yes.
How do you get the schools to maybe understand the side of the intuitive side? What have you seen or done or how have you been able to work with that? Because I know schools don't understand this.
As of this time, I wouldn't say that I've approached that with the schools. Directly. Indirectly, teach them visualizations, put a protection bubble around themselves, right? We don't always have to label it, because sometimes labeling it is going to create more of a barrier than an acceptance. Whereas if we just start saying, and to some people, right? And when we're talking about, let's say, the public school system, or any school system, people might be very anxious about some of these things. So if I just start telling them what to do, there might then be the road in for, oh, these kids are very sensitive and they're kind of feeling everybody else's feelings. I mean, we could just start talking about what it is, right? Versus sometimes bringing in the label, because I feel like I always want to become an ally to the teacher. I don't ever want to go into a situation and start wagging my finger. That's not going to get you anywhere. That's not how I work anyway, but I'm very much more into collaboration, right? So I will meet the teachers where they're at so that they can also feel empowered to help the kids. I want to come in and be a problem solver, but my role in schools is not like I have a private practice, right? So what we do is in outpatient work. In years past, and Rebecca's on this, so I'll say, like, the first time I met Rebecca, she was teaching my son in the first grade. And I was also working with some kids in the classroom, and I had the pleasure of going into her classroom and just, and I always start real small with my requests or expectations. And Rebecca was just like a sponge, and she was so excited to try these things. And I see Gail is on here too, and her community of teachers, the preschool where Gail is at, they're also open and receptive and helping. So I mean, yeah, I just try to find ways of collaboration, right? Versus like telling people what they might be doing, quote unquote, wrong. I'm not a teacher. They have a different job than I do. They have I think, a harder job. I'm married to a teacher as well. So, it's, I just want to be a collaborator. So I always kind of go in the spirit of collaboration. And where I might find those doors at the moment in schools is to go in through something that feels comfortable for everybody to help the kids,
And I think that's great, because we're going to have some teachers, educators listening to this on the replay, and we have mental health professionals in the group and parents. And this is good, I think, for them to hear, that how they could work with the OT or work with,
Sure.
and just being aware that these children have different needs. And so this is good. I wanted you to be able to just talk about it. And then parents too, because it's hard when you know your child's highly intuitive. How do you get the school to understand it? How do you get to, start working it? For us personally, with our son, we just had the benefit of being on a show as well, the Psychic Kids show. But we just started having these conversations about how he was sensitive to the energies around him and how he needed to take break. Ethan would come and tell us how sometimes he would just go to the bathroom just because he needed to get out of the class. We didn't need to go to the bathroom. He just needed a break.
Yeah, we teach kids that. Yeah.
Yeah. We were talking to the teachers about he just needs more, breaks. And like you said, just trying to find ways to get them to understand what the sensitivity means and how to work with it.
Yeah. And I think that's the perfect way to talk about it, is sensitive, because that can mean so many different things. And if you're just start talking about, being sensitive, and then you can kind of get into some more detail, it's very helpful.
Well, there was a question I was going to read in the chat, but somebody was just getting ready to ask a question.
Oh yeah, I was going to ask a question. Hi, my name is Brandy, and I find this talk really amazing. I am starting a school for students that are dyslexic. And so it's a new school starting and just trying to help that population of students here in the area that we live in. And so this is something that I think that having sensitive children, 3 of them, and 2 of them having dyslexia, they are very sensitive to like their environment when they do go to school. And, my daughter, can pick up on a lot of different things in the classroom, and even with the teachers and the staff, how it impacts her every single day in the classroom. And then what it does to her when she gets out of it, when she's leaving school. Some are, drained or just like upset or angry and all these different emotions. So, I'm always helping her with, doing the protection around her and things like that. But it's actually really interesting because I don't think that sometimes teachers really are understanding that piece of how that plays into the kids when they're teaching them, like where the teacher is and where they're coming from that day when they're in that day teaching. So that's something that, as a school, really working on that whole social emotional piece for kids. So this is really awesome listening to you. So thank you, Kate.
Oh yeah, thank you so much for sharing, and thank you for starting a school to help support these guys. It's just the brain works differently. It's wired differently. It sees in pictures in these cases. It sees in a very different way. So you can only imagine how that could lend itself to just being so lit up and highly intuitive and perhaps even clairvoyant, with that kind of imagery, right? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm seeing a question in the chat about the ADHD meds and dull or negatively affect. Yeah, that's a really good question. And I will just say from my personal belief is that now I'm not completely anti-medication, although I will say let's try lots of other things first, especially when they're young. We can look at diet. We can look at movement. We can look at supplements. We can look at all of that first. And when that's been looked at, it's unfortunately what's happening is it's become the quick fix. And I don't know what's happening where everybody else is, but in Atlanta, I mean, the schools are pushing it hard, medication for kids. And I understand the issues with the teachers, but I think I don't know about dull or negatively affect a child's intuitive gifts, but I would say that in my experience, in seeing a number of children who've gone, and I will also say, we really take all this into account that the families are just doing what they can. And we don't want to we want to educate them without alienating them or without that finger wagging. I'm not interested in that. I'm not into it. People are just coping as best as they can. So we try to inform. But, it's a really good question, Emily. I don't know the answer to it, but I will say that people that go down the meds road early on, it's tricky because you're then managing all the side effects of the medicines, and then sometimes additional medicines are added to counteract the side effects, and it can get into this spiral sometimes that can be more problematic than any of the shoes in the first place. So I'm cautious with it. And I also know that particularly for ADHD, what you're looking for with the medicines is like a silver bullet. Like if your child is on a medicine, you want it to be like night and day improvement versus like, oh, I think it's better. And then we've got 10 side effects, right? So like, if that is the path, I do encourage you look at first nutrition and then lots of healthy movement before you start looking at medication. And it gets tricky because with the nutrition, because we get a lot of picky eaters, right? So that becomes the trick, but that's always the first recommendation for me.
That's excellent, Kate. I like that, because just like you said, changing diet, taking so much with sugars in it, in so many different foods and fast foods and different
Preservatives, color,
right?
all of it.
And all of it affects kids and adults. It affects everybody. And
yes,
that's important. So I think you're right. Checking those things first before jumping to medications.
And it's that other stuff with the diet and the movement and all that. It's not the quick fix. It's not. And that's why people, I think, they're tired, they're busy, they don't want to go through a screaming kid who's got to have this cheese fix, then try to eliminate the dairy. And I have the compassion, right, for the families going through that too, that are just trying to make it through the day. I see it from all the different sides, right? Again, like it's complex.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I want to make it, this hour went by so quick, and I knew it would, because this is a big topic and there's a lot around it to talk about. But this is just, we wanted to kind of lay the foundation, have this conversation. Someone did put using non-toxic products through the house.
Yes.
In life also. So that's important too.
Yes.
Yeah, that's important. So, and there's just lots of different things that you can try, like you said, Kate, before jumping to medications. So this is so helpful. So this, if there's enough interest, we can have you come back and we can do some more conversation around this. And then Rebecca is here. If you could hold her book up, Rebecca.
Yes, I'll hold it up again.
Community. Rebecca was here back in September. We do have a video, and I can repost her video in the group as well. Let them move. That was an excellent conversation about how movement is so helpful in grounding to kids, that it can process that energy, and then they're centered and focused for learning, and that can eliminate some of what can appear to be ADHD symptoms.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Ellen, I was thinking about when you all were talking about when Kate was talking about how to talk about things with teachers. I'm gearing up to do a big presentation for one of my schools, and I'd love to maybe share some more, because it relates to everything that Kate's saying. It's kind of the back door. Like, I'm going to talk to the teachers really about all their intuitive, empathic kids, but through the language of, okay, so we've got these kids and they're, they have these different needs, they have these, and just like, what can we do to help them be able to get through the day and feel, safe and cared for, and want to be doing school. So
now that would be great, because I want to have you back to do more conversation, because once again, when we did yours, it wasn't, it's short time, but just getting people some information and making them aware. So we definitely want to have you back. We have both you and Kate together, but
awesome.
have more of a conversation around.
And I want to plug this a little bit more, just to say it's a really good book. It's accessible for everybody, but it is geared to teachers. Okay. So it's very easy to read. It's very quick. The illustrations in here are awesome. I'm just so fortunate to know Becca for so many years, and to have her as a part of my team, and I love so much that she also works directly in the school system, and she is really, as having over 10 years in education before she became a therapist, it just puts her in such a good position to be able to help those teachers. So I'm just so grateful. So buy this book. It is so good, and get it for your kid's teacher.
Yes. Give copies.
Thank you, Kate. Well,
Oh, go ahead, Rebecca.
I was gonna say it was all inspired. I mean, really, the inspiration originally came from Kate coming into the classroom years ago. So it all works
Full
together.
circle, right?
Well, and I will
Or a
say that
spiral.
it is on the Highly Intuitive Kids website. For anybody who doesn't know, it's highlyyintuitivekids.com. There's books and resources, and Rebecca's book is out there. So if you're going to buy it, also buy it through our link. That helps us if you can get it there on Amazon. But it is an excellent book, and definitely, like what Kate said, get a copy for yourself, get a copy for the teacher. It's a very good resource. Very good. And although it's geared toward younger kids, it applies to older kids as well. Rebecca, if you want to talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, the interventions are kind of more specific to younger kids, but the concept applies to all age groups, really. But it's just the younger kids, tend to be the ones that really, they get stuck sitting in chairs way too much. But even as they get older, our whole lives we do. I mean, that's why I'm in the profession I am, but so I can actually move my body around. I would not be able to sit at a desk all day. It wouldn't work. So
Now I'm just going to go
So-
just a couple quick more minutes. There's a couple more items in the chat. We have I want to be respectful of people's time, but it's like, how do we get this to be mandatory book for teachers and educators and therapists?
thanks, Kelby.
Well, I'll tell you, when I got hold of Rebecca's book, when it first came out and she and I talked and we did our interview, I gave a copy to the principal at my son's school. And it's like, hey, this is something, you might just want to check out and look. And she was like, oh, great, we'll take a look at it. But I think parents can also stand in that gap as well as donating, gifting it to teachers, because some of them don't even know this resource is out there. So we can do that. That can help as well, because you're going to have those who will read it and those who won't, but it'll be helpful. Yeah. And then there's another one here that says, thank you both for an eye-opening discussion. Do you think children are naturally intuitive?
I mean, I do. I think that we all have the ability. Every single person has this ability, and we were trained out of it. We were trained not to trust ourselves. We were told we can't trust ourselves. I'm going to just go out on a limb here and say, especially the women. Okay. You cannot trust yourself. You must go to somebody who's got the answer, who's got the opinion, but you don't have it. And what my purpose is for the children I work with, and also the adults I work with in my energetic practice, because actually I'm working with all these adults that were told that they are, were taught out of it. So I'm trying to just reconnect people to their gifts and teaching them that this is what an intuitive head feels like. I think children are absolutely naturally intuitive. And this is, Alan, this speaks to your son, I know, but there's been so many children that I have worked with very recently who have full past life memory.
Mm-hmm.
And some beyond the really little kids. Like I was working with an 8 or 9-year-old boy who had a full past life recall. And it was so scary to him because it was in the war, and he knew all these details. I mean, it was just, it's fascinating what's happening. So I do see that this is happening much more. I don't know why. I have my ideas about why, but I can't say for sure why. I have my ideas. And I think that, it's a gift to them to listen to them and hear them.
And Kate, I'm going to echo everything you say. I say 100%. It's a shift going on. To me, it's like human consciousness, like there's an evolution, things are changing. These kids are coming in for their generation with these unique sets of abilities and this different type of connection that's going to be needed for what's going to carry things forward. But every person, I 100% agree. And I'd say that's the same thing. Everybody, every child, every person is intuitive. We are taught out of it. It's belief systems. It's, that you come up with. It's just the way society is it's to trust outside of ourselves. We're not taught to trust our own, is to always look outside of ourselves for guidance or for answers, even starting just with your parents, parents and families. So you're absolutely, I 100% agree, but everybody's intuitive. And you're right, because even for the clients that I see, I'm helping to reconnect people back, talking about recovering and reclaiming their inner knowing and trusting that, because they've gotten disconnected from it. So, and I think if we can start opening, the more we open these conversations and have experts like Kate, who's seeing this in her practice and working with kids, and the more people share their stories and the more we're all talking about it, we're going to just start to see that we can, and opening adult minds, the more we open adult minds, the more we help the children, because they're going to know how they need to shift it to change, to help this. It's just like a new generation of very connected children coming in with a different purpose and mission than what we've had in the past. And we have to catch up with it. We have to parent them differently, teach them differently, whole works. So that's why I love what you're doing, Kate. I love that you're bridging the intuitive and the medical, and you're getting this out there, and what you're doing is beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much. I know I'm certainly not the first, but I'm so happy to be doing this, as scary as it was. And I'm sure there'll be times it'll get feel a little bit intimidating, but I feel very called to this. This is a calling for me.
Well, I want to thank you. It's almost like I don't want the conversation to end. This is great. But we can always do a continuation if people are interested. We can keep this conversation going. But I wanted to, just to thank you. I also want to let people know, visit our Highly Intuitive Kids website. We have information out there. It says for parents, for educators, and others are any, mental health professional, service professionals of any kind. But there is a section out there how high intuition mimics other diagnoses like ADHD, sensory processing disorder, high sensitivity. Go out there and read that information. Part of the purpose of the website too is when you're having these conversations with schools, and if it's coming up issues with your child, that's a credible resource, and it's linked back to like the Mayo Clinic and different PhD studies. Read it, and you can point them to that as a source of, just check it out and see, get them to open their minds. But you have something that you can point to for people to start to read, start getting more information, resources out there to embrace it, and maybe to help to open up some thinking.
I love it, Ellen. Thank you so much for creating that platform.
Yeah.
So needed.
Yeah. We wanted to find ways that we could help support families like what we had to figure out. So thank you. Thank you so much, Kate. Truly appreciate
Thanks.
it.
It was wonderful to see you all. And thanks for the platform, Ellen. Thanks for hosting me. And thank you for the beautiful work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
And right back at you. So we'll continue this, because we do want to have you back and Rebecca back and have some more conversation, because this is there's a lot more to this, and this is just only the beginning that we can start sharing out with parents and educators and others to help keep the conversations going and continue to raise awareness and understanding.
That's right. That's right. Well, thanks again. And I really appreciate it.
Great. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Recording.